Imagine for a second that you're in your kitchen right now.
Okay.
You're wrapping up your evening, maybe putting together a quick sandwich for tomorrow's lunch. You wipe down the counter, you walk into the hallway, and you yell to your roommate to do a quick load of laundry because you absolutely need your work uniform clean for Wednesday.
Right, just a totally normal Tuesday night or whatever.
Exactly. Completely normal. You grab your coat, walk out the front door into the evening air, and you vanish.
Wow.
Completely. Just gone from the face of the earth.
It is, it's the ultimate cognitive dissonance, isn't it?
Yeah.
Your brain just really struggles to reconcile the absolute banality of those final moments with the sheer, permanence of the vanishing that follows.
Right, and that jarring juxtaposition is exactly where we are planting our flag today. So
Right.
welcome to a very different kind of deep dive.
Yes.
Because for you, the listener, we are setting some strict ground rules right off the bat today. We are opening a historical time capsule here.
And we are not going to play modern armchair detective.
No, absolutely not. There are no dramatic reenactments, no sensational true crime theories.
No attempts to solve an unsolvable puzzle.
Exactly. We are operating under a very strict constraint.
We are looking exclusively at a collection of original historical newspaper clippings from a publication called the High Point Enterprise.
Which was based in High Point, North Carolina.
Right, and we are isolating a very specific window of time here, November 1954 through April 1955.
Yeah, the mission here is basically to trace the documentary record of the disappearance of Veronica Cox. She was a 38-year-old waitress living in High Point.
And we really want to see exactly how a community, the local press and the police department documented a sudden, inexplicable absence in real time.
Long before the era of smartphones, GPS tracking.
Digital footprints, yeah, all of that. We are reading the raw first draft of history, essentially, to understand the mechanics of a mid-century investigation.
Which means we really have to embrace the analog pacing and the very specific reporting styles of 1954 journalism.
Oh, absolutely. The level of granular detail the reporters chose to publish is astounding.
It really is.
It gives us this incredibly clear window into the daily rhythm of an American town at that exact moment in time.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I want to build this timeline exactly as the High Point Enterprise presented it to its readers back then.
Let's do it.
So we are going back to Monday, October 25th, 1954.
Okay.
It's the evening shift at the Sheraton Hotel in High Point. Picture, like a bustling 1950s hotel dining room.
Heavy silverware clinking against china, thick cigarette smoke in the air.
Men in tailored suits, women in dresses, all that. And navigating all of this is Veronica Cox working her shift as a waitress.
And the November 12th edition of the paper actually attempts to reconstruct this evening almost minute by minute.
Yeah, which is incredible.
It is. And the entire timeline hinges on a single disruptive event at roughly 8:30 p.m.
The phone call.
She receives a phone call, yes.
And I think the physical reality of how that phone call happened is just so crucial to understand. Because today, if someone wants to reach you at work, your cell phone just buzzes silently in your pocket.
Right. It's a private exchange between you and the caller.
Exactly. But in 1954, at a major hotel, a phone call was an inherently public event.
Oh, highly public. The caller had to ring the hotel switchboard first.
Right. The operator on duty had to manually patch the cord through.
And then Miss Cox had to be physically paged on the floor to come to one of the receiver stations.
And those stations were located directly in the dining room itself.
So because of that physical, tethered setup, her private conversation was suddenly subject to an audience.
Yeah, everyone around her. And the newspaper actually reports that the operator put the call through, and other waitresses in the vicinity overheard distinct fragments of Miss Cox's half of the dialogue.
Which is how we get these incredible direct quotes printed in the paper.
Yeah, so colleagues heard her say, quote, "I can go if I'm ready in 15 minutes.
And then she follows it up with a phrase that sounds like it was pulled straight out of a noir film.
Oh, completely. She says, "I'll tell her my business."
It's a fascinating linguistic artifact, really.
Right. I'll tell her my business.
It implies this sudden need to defend her autonomy, or explain herself to a third party.
Yeah, she's being challenged.
Exactly. It establishes that whatever the catalyst was for this call, it was urgent, it required her immediate presence, and it represented a definitive break from her expected routine for that evening.
So, okay, the call ends. It's now approaching 9 p.m., and the paper gets incredibly specific here, noting that at exactly 8:58 p.m., Miss Cox is in the hotel dressing room changing into her street clothes.
Right, getting ready to leave.
Some other waitresses are getting off work at the exact same time. Miss Cox tells her colleagues she is in a rush, but she makes a very clear, explicit promise.
She says she will be back in 15 minutes.
Right. She explains she just needs to, quote, finish up her business.
And then the reporting gives us this brief, almost trivial exchange that really highlights how unexpected her departure was.
Yeah, another waitress jokes with her.
Right, asking if she's getting into any monkey business.
Monkey business. Right. Which is such a 50s phrase.
It really is. And Miss Cox's reply is deeply intriguing. She says, "I'll give you who I was going with, you'd be surprised."
Okay, I want to dissect that sentence for a second. I'll give you who I was going with, you'd be surprised.
It's loaded.
It is. She doesn't name the person, obviously. But the phrasing strongly suggests it's someone known to her social circle.
Right, someone the other waitresses would recognize.
But someone they absolutely wouldn't expect her to be rushing off to meet in the middle of a Monday evening.
Exactly. It frames the departure not as a clandestine meeting with a stranger, but as a surprising interaction with a known entity.
Yeah.
And following this exchange, the paper reports she literally sprints out of the hotel.
She walks at a very fast pace, presumably heading straight home.
Right.
So let's follow her home, because the setting here is another massive piece of 1950s context for you to visualize.
Yes, the boarding house.
Right. She didn't live in a private apartment complex. She lived in a boarding house. The address was 2204 Forest Avenue, and it was operated by a Mrs. A.E. Teeter.
And boarding houses were such a staple of mid-century American life, particularly for single, working-class adults.
They offered an affordable room, right?
Yeah, and often shared communal spaces like a den or a kitchen and a built-in, albeit loose, social structure.
Which meant you were rarely completely unobserved.
Exactly. Your comings and goings were noted by the landlady or your fellow boarders.
Which is exactly why the newspaper was able to construct such a, honestly, cinematic account of her arrival.
Because someone was watching.
Right. The paper states she gets to the Teeter house at approximately 9:15 p.m. When she walks through the front door, the house is mostly quiet.
But Mr. Robertson is sitting in the den at the rear of the house, reading.
Yes, he hears her enter. He hears her go into her own room near the front entrance. Then, a few minutes later, he hears her walk into the kitchen, which is adjacent to the den.
And this is where the reporting captures those staggeringly ordinary details we discussed at the very beginning of the deep dive.
Yeah, this is the part that just gets me. She calls out to Mr. Robertson from the kitchen. She tells him she is leaving some cornbread on the counter, quote, for you all to eat.
She literally leaves a plate of cornbread for her housemates.
Yes. And then she turns to head toward the front of the house to leave, but then she stops.
She walks back to the den, stands in the doorway, looks at Mr. Robertson and says, "Jack, how about asking Mrs. Teeter to wash out a slip for me? I'll need it Wednesday."
A slip, like an undergarment.
Right. And Mr. Robertson confirms he will pass the message along.
She turns around, walks out the front door, and a minute later, he hears a car drive away.
And that is the definitive end of the historical timeline of her presence.
The trail goes completely cold right there on Forest Avenue.
Yep.
The cornbread and the slip.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to read those details and not feel the profound whiplash of the situation.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, why do you think a front-page newspaper article documenting a potentially fatal disappearance devoted so much column space to a plate of leftover cornbread and a laundry request?
Well, what's fascinating here is that in 1954, those details were the foundational building blocks of behavioral profiling.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. When a person vanishes, the immediate overriding question for law enforcement is one of intent.
Like, did they mean to leave?
Exactly. Did this individual orchestrate their own disappearance to start a new life? Or were they intercepted by an outside force against their will?
And without the luxury of modern technology, the police had to rely entirely on environmental and behavioral clues to answer that question of intent.
Precisely. Because if you are harboring a secret plan to abandon your life on a Monday night, or if you are in the grips of a severe mental health crisis driving you to wander away, your cognitive focus is entirely consumed by that immediate crisis or plan.
Right, you're not thinking about leftovers.
You do not pause your grand escape to ensure your roommate has a late-night snack. And you absolutely do not ask your landlady to launder a specific piece of clothing because you are planning your outfit for your next shift on Wednesday.
That makes total sense. Those requests firmly anchor her psychology in the mundane reality of her daily routine.
Exactly.
It proves to the detectives, and really to the readers of the High Point Enterprise, that at 9:15 p.m., Veronica Cox fully intended to return to that boarding house shortly.
Her mental timeline extended to Wednesday. She wasn't fleeing.
The abruptness is terrifying. She steps out the door, fully anchored in her life, and simply ceases to exist in the documentary record.
It really is.
The paper does note one final physical clue from the neighborhood, though.
The car.
Right. No one could identify the specific make or model of the car she got into, but they did find one neighbor who recalled seeing an automobile pull up a little after 9 p.m.
And the neighbor noted it was a dark color, but couldn't specify if it was black, maroon, or dark green.
Black, maroon, or dark green.
It perfectly encapsulates the frustrating ambiguity of eyewitness testimony.
It really does. It's a detail that feels important, but is practically useless for a targeted search. Like, what do you do with that?
Nothing, really.
And the paper even meticulously records what she was wearing as she stepped into that dark car.
Right. She had on a black crepe dress, figured in white, a brown raincoat, and she was carrying a shoulder bag.
A complete frozen snapshot of a woman stepping into the void.
But, perhaps the most shocking element of this entire timeline isn't what happened on October 25th, but what didn't happen on October 26th or the 27th or the 28th.
Yeah. Which brings us to a crucial structural difference in how society operated back then.
Because despite vanishing into an unidentified car on a Monday night after promising to return in 15 minutes, the High Point police were not notified until a full week later.
November 1st.
Yes.
A full week. We have to completely strip away our modern expectations of connectivity to understand this delay.
Oh, absolutely. Today, if a friend says, "I'll be right back," and drops off the grid, panic sets in within hours.
Yeah, we send a text, it goes green instead of blue. We call, it goes straight to voicemail.
We check their location on a social app. The absence of digital friction means an absence of physical presence is noted almost instantaneously.
But in the 1950s, people were allowed to be unreachable.
It was a completely normal state of being.
The newspaper explicitly explains this delay by reporting that Miss Cox's friends and coworkers simply assumed she had taken an impromptu trip to Hamlet, North Carolina, to visit her mother.
And this tells us so much about the social fabric of the era.
Yeah.
A 38-year-old woman taking an unannounced trip for a few days to see family wasn't viewed as an immediate crisis. It was just a lapse in communication.
They figured she changed her plans, caught a bus, and would explain it when she got back.
Right. The paper notes that concern only really began to mount on Wednesday.
Ah, the day she supposedly needed that slip washed for work.
Exactly. When she failed to show up for her shift, the worry started.
But even then, they didn't immediately call the authorities. They waited.
It wasn't until friends finally decided to navigate the friction of long-distance communication that the reality set in.
Right, because they had to place a toll call to Miss Cox's brother, Volley Cox, who lived in Hamlet.
And making a long-distance call in 1954 wasn't a casual undertaking.
No, not at all.
It cost significant money by the minute. It often required operator assistance to patch the trunk lines, and it required the person on the other end to actually be sitting at home near their receiver to answer.
Yeah, you couldn't just leave a voice note. So when they finally reached her brother and confirmed she hadn't been to Hamlet, the illusion shattered.
The police were finally brought in on November 1st.
And once the High Point police mobilized, they went straight to her room at the Teeter boarding house.
The November 12th article says they went over the room with a fine-tooth comb.
And what they discovered systematically dismantled any lingering hope that she had simply run off.
Because the physical inventory of her room was incredibly telling. In an investigation completely devoid of digital data, the physical objects left behind are the only reliable witnesses.
Yeah, the reporting is painstakingly detailed about her belongings. All of her luggage remained in the room.
Her heavy winter coats and the bulk of her clothing were still hanging in the closet.
The only clothes missing were the black crepe dress and the brown raincoat she was wearing when she walked out the door.
Furthermore, investigators found an overnight bag in the room.
And inside it, they found articles of clothing, various insurance papers, a building and loan deposit book, and a handbag containing cash.
And the paper specifically notes that the overnight bag looked like it was being used for domestic storage, not packed and staged for an impending trip.
Right. They also found a small makeup kit, the specific kind women carried when traveling.
She left that behind as well.
But the most critical discovery, the detail that the newspaper emphasizes heavily, is her finances.
Yes.
She left money in her room, and she left even more money in a safety deposit box at the hotel where she worked.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we really need to underline the economic reality of 1954 here.
Because we live in a world of frictionless digital finance. Your money travels with you on a plastic card or an app on your phone.
Exactly. But mid-century America was heavily reliant on physical cash and physical bank books.
If you wanted to extract funds, you had to literally walk into a bank branch during banking hours.
Present your physical deposit book to a teller and sign a withdrawal slip.
So, if you are planning to voluntarily leave town for a prolonged stay, you do not leave your deposit book in an overnight bag under your bed.
Leaving your physical cash and your bank books behind meant you were leaving behind your literal means of survival.
The newspaper states this conclusion unequivocally. They wrote, quote, "The fact that she left money in her room and still more in a safety deposit box at the hotel has served to explode the theory that she left High Point voluntarily for a prolonged stay."
The financial evidence shifted the entire paradigm of the investigation.
Yeah. The November 12th headline reflects this grim pivot. Quote, "Friends, detectives now believe missing waitress has been slain."
Just 17 days after she stepped into that dark car, the police were officially assuming foul play based entirely on the contents of her closet and her bank book.
But, assuming foul play and proving it are two very different things.
Oh, totally. The local detectives were meticulously trying to close every alternative door.
Right. They had to rule out non-criminal tragedies first, so they checked her medical records.
They tracked down a local physician who had treated Miss Cox back in September for what the paper describes as a minor glandular ailment.
But the doctor reported to the police that her overall health was sound, and more importantly, her mental attitude was good.
Because they were checking for any physiological or psychological catalyst, right?
Right, like was she suffering from a condition that might induce sudden amnesia or confusion, causing her to wander off?
Was she facing a terminal diagnosis that might prompt self-harm? The doctor's testimony effectively closed that door.
So the local physical evidence is exhausted. Her room yields nothing but proof that she didn't mean to leave.
The medical angle yields nothing.
The local neighborhood canvas yields a vaguely colored car. So where does a 1954 detective go next?
Well, you have to look outward to her social network. But again, you run face first into the technological limitations of the era.
Right, which brings us to one of the most astonishing details in the entire archive, detailed in the late November clippings.
Detective Captain W.C. Johnson found Miss Cox's personal address book in her room.
And to check her broader social network for leads, he focused on her Christmas mailing list.
The logistics of this are just staggering to consider today.
I really want you to think about how you would execute this task right now as the listener. If a friend goes missing, you open their social media profile, you click on their friends list, you highlight all, and you send a mass direct message. Hey, have you seen Veronica?
It takes roughly 45 seconds.
Yeah, and you have replies within minutes. Now transpose that task to 1954.
Captain Johnson had to physically type or handwrite individual official police inquiries.
He had to put them in envelopes, address them, purchase postage, and physically mail them out through the United States Postal Service to addresses scattered all over the country. And the paper notes that he sent letters to, quote, more than 50 persons throughout the country.
50 physical letters.
And then the High Point Police Department simply had to wait.
They had to wait for the mail trains to deliver the letters.
For the recipients to open them, read them, draft a reply, buy a stamp, and mail their response back to North Carolina.
It perfectly illustrates the intense friction of information exchange back then. The entire investigation was throttled by the speed of the mailman.
Yeah. Weeks passed just waiting for the Postal Service to complete this loop.
And the result?
Captain Johnson reported that he received replies from the 50 people on the list. All of them expressed shock, all of them expressed a desire to help, and absolutely none of them had a single clue to offer.
The Christmas list, which took immense logistical effort to query, proved entirely fruitless.
So when your primary physical evidence yields nothing, and your expanded social network yields nothing, an investigation hits a wall.
The only remaining avenue is to appeal to the general public.
But opening the investigation to the public means opening the floodgates to unverified information.
Oh, big time.
Once the High Point Enterprise began heavily reporting on the case in mid-November, the police had to manage a community reacting to a mystery in real time. This is where the information space gets incredibly messy.
The phenomenon of public tips in high-profile cases is always a double-edged sword. People genuinely want to be helpful, but human memory is notoriously malleable.
Right.
The power of suggestion is immense.
The November 12th article briefly touches on this, noting that police receive a few leads from people they described as, quote, cranks.
Right, like the taxi driver.
Yeah, they give one specific example. A local taxi driver claimed he picked Miss Cox up near the hotel on the night of October 25th. He told police he drove her to the bus station, where he saw her get out and get into a, quote, shiny black car.
Notice how the ambiguous dark car from the neighborhood canvas suddenly morphed into a shiny black car at a prominent transit hub in the taxi driver's memory.
It's so suggestive. The police investigated the taxi driver's claim and quickly determined it was unfounded. They dismissed it entirely.
But the local police were still forced to sift through these distorted memories manually.
Right. And the most prominent lead they received, one that got front-page follow-up coverage across multiple days, was an out-of-state sighting.
The South Carolina lead.
Yes.
This sequence of reporting in the November 29th and 30th editions is really a masterclass in how mid-century journalism documented the investigation, paying particular attention to who the witness was.
Because here's where it gets really interesting. The newspaper reports that a man living in Winston-Salem went to the Twin City police to report a potential sighting.
He claimed he believed he saw Veronica Cox a week prior in a hotel lobby in Greenville, South Carolina.
And High Point detectives were so intrigued by this tip that they dispatched two investigators, Clay Andrews and R.G. Kearns, all the way to Winston-Salem just to conduct the interview.
And the way the newspaper presents this witness to the public is vital to understanding the context of the era's journalism. They don't print the man's name,
Right.
but they are very careful to outline his occupational standing.
I found this detail fascinating. The November 30th article quotes Captain Johnson saying, quote, "The man is a supervisor of a Winston-Salem trucking firm and travels a good deal."
And then Johnson adds that the man is, quote, "a reputable and prominent citizen whose word can be trusted."
The paper explicitly uses his job title as a shorthand for reliability.
Exactly. A local taxi driver's tip about the bus station is dismissed as the work of a crank.
But a trucking firm supervisor's tip warrants dispatching two detectives to another city because he is defined as a prominent citizen.
And the newspaper reports this distinction as a simple matter of fact for its readership.
So, relying on the word of this prominent citizen, what exactly did he claim to witness in South Carolina?
Well, he told the detectives that he was in a hotel lobby in Greenville at breakfast time.
Okay.
He saw a woman he believed to be Miss Cox standing in the lobby, looking as though she was trying to locate the dining room.
And he noted she wasn't alone.
Right. He stated she was in the company of two men, estimating their ages to be between 35 and 40 years old.
The witness even provided dialogue. He claimed he heard one of the men say to the woman, quote, "The dining room is this way."
After that, the trio reportedly walked into the dining room together.
The witness explained his recognition by noting he had previously seen Miss Cox working in the Sheraton Hotel dining room back in High Point during his travels.
But there's a massive caveat to his story.
Oh, a huge one.
He admitted to the detectives that it didn't dawn on him that the woman in Greenville was the missing waitress until he had completely finished his trip and returned home to Winston-Salem.
Right. It was only after he was back in North Carolina that his brain connected the face in the hotel to the face in the newspaper.
Delayed recognition sightings are a classic hallmark of missing persons cases, and they're fraught with psychological pitfalls.
Because a man who travels frequently sees a woman in a hotel lobby. Days later, he reads widespread local news coverage about a missing woman who happens to work in a hotel.
The brain seeks patterns, and it stitches those two disparate data points together into a cohesive narrative.
Even Captain Johnson approached this prominent citizen's story with caution, honestly.
Yeah.
The paper reports Johnson viewed the development with, quote, "some skepticism." He acknowledges that reports from people who think they have seen a missing person, quote, "often prove to be groundless when they are checked into."
He openly suggests it could be a simple case of mistaken identity, but emphasizes that the police cannot afford to overlook any possibility.
Which forces us to look at the mechanics of how they actually checked into it. Like, how does a police captain in High Point, North Carolina, quickly verify a delayed recognition sighting in Greenville, South Carolina in late 1954?
The answer is, they didn't do it quickly. They couldn't.
The newspaper outlines the exact procedure. Quote, Johnson said, "Pictures, description, and complete information about Miss Cox's disappearance have been forwarded to the Greenville Chief of Police."
Forwarded. They relied on the Postal Service again.
Let's break down the sheer mechanical effort of that single sentence. Captain Johnson had to take physical photographs of Miss Cox.
He had to type up a physical description and a summary of the case on a typewriter.
He had to place those documents into a manila envelope, affix postage, and mail it across state lines.
And then the paper simply says he, quote, awaited word.
The jurisdictional isolation is profound. He was completely dependent on the Greenville police chief, receiving that envelope days later.
The Greenville chief then had to assign an officer to physically take the photograph to the specific hotel lobby.
Interview the desk clerks. Check the physical paper registry to see if a woman matching the description had booked a room.
Ask the waitstaff in the dining room if they recalled the trio.
Compile those findings into a physical report, put that report in an envelope, and mail it back to North Carolina.
It is a multi-day, potentially multi-week endeavor just to run down a single tip that the captain himself suspected was likely mistaken identity.
I mean, if this happened today, an investigator would look up the hotel's phone number, call the manager, request they email the digital registry for that morning, and ask them to review the lobby security camera footage.
The entire lead could be debunked or verified in 20 minutes.
Right. But in 1954, the analog friction forces investigators to expend massive amounts of time and energy on dead ends simply because there is no fast-track method to rule them out.
The system was inherently slow, methodical, and bound by physical geography.
But as we move forward in the archival timeline, we see that while official police work moved at the speed of the mailman, rumors possess a terrifying capacity to transcend those limitations.
The contrast between the slow, deliberate, mail-based investigation and the explosive nature of the next major development is really stark.
Yeah.
It shows us that the architecture for rapid misinformation existed long before the internet.
Let's jump forward in the clippings. So the South Carolina lead fizzles out. The trail goes completely cold over the winter months.
We pick up the story again in the spring.
We are looking at the April 2nd and April 15th, 1955 editions of the High Point Enterprise. It has been nearly 6 months since Veronica Cox left the cornbread in the kitchen and walked out the door.
And 6 months is a grueling milestone in a disappearance.
It really is.
The initial shock of the community has faded, replaced by a dull, enduring anxiety for the family.
The local police have exhausted their room searches, their medical inquiries, their mail campaigns, and their out-of-state tips. The investigation is essentially dormant.
But then out of nowhere, the case is reignited by a jolt of sheer terror.
And the catalyst wasn't a new piece of physical evidence or a detective's breakthrough. It was a radio broadcast.
And this incident is arguably the most culturally illuminating event documented in these clippings.
Definitely.
It highlights the immense power and the potential peril of early broadcast media.
According to the April clippings, a sister-in-law of Veronica Cox, who is living back in her hometown of Hamlet, North Carolina, heard something on the radio that completely upended the family.
She contacted the High Point police in a state of panic.
She reported that she had just listened to a radio broadcast stating that an unidentified woman's body had been discovered in a swamp in Hoboken, New Jersey.
And the details she relayed from the broadcast were horrifyingly specific.
Yes, she told the police the broadcast alleged that the body had been decomposing for approximately 2.5 months.
And, most critically, she claimed the physical description provided by the radio announcer generally matched that of Veronica Cox.
Put yourself in that living room in rural North Carolina for a moment. You have been waiting 6 months for any news about your missing sister-in-law.
You turn on the radio, an authoritative voice fills the room, and suddenly they are describing a body in a New Jersey swamp that sounds exactly like her.
The psychological impact of that unverified transmission is immense. It induces immediate visceral trauma.
The sister-in-law begs the High Point police to investigate immediately.
Detective Captain Johnson receives this urgent call on a Saturday. He immediately calls the authorities in Hoboken, New Jersey. But a cross-country tip involving a potential homicide victim requires a higher level of jurisdiction.
Right, because the local police department in North Carolina cannot conduct an investigation in a New Jersey swamp.
Exactly. So Captain Johnson has to escalate the matter to the federal level.
He contacts the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
The FBI is brought in to assist the local departments in running down this radio lead.
So we have gone from Mrs. Teeter's boarding house on Forest Avenue to involving federal agents in a multi-state investigation, all triggered by a single radio transmission.
It is a massive institutional escalation. The High Point Police, the Hoboken Police, and the FBI are all suddenly mobilized to locate this swamp body.
And the resolution to this massive deployment of resources, we find it in the April 15th article.
The headline is succinct and brutal. Quote, Cox case clue is false.
The culmination of the federal inquiry resulted in absolute zero.
The article reports that the Bureau of Missing Persons in Hoboken, New Jersey, communicated back to the High Point Police via the FBI that absolutely no such body had been found in their jurisdiction in the past year.
There was no body. There was no swamp discovery.
The 2.5-month decomposition timeline was fiction.
The entire premise of the radio broadcast was a phantom.
The Hoboken authorities literally had no record of anything even resembling the event described on the radio, which forces us to ask a monumental question. So what does this all mean for the media landscape of 1955?
Right.
How does a detailed rumor about a non-existent dead body in a New Jersey swamp end up being broadcast on a radio station heard in Hamlet, North Carolina?
This raises an important question, really, because this is where historical context disrupts our modern biases. We suffer from this sort of chronological snobbery regarding misinformation.
Oh, for sure.
We tend to believe that fake news, viral hoaxes, and the rapid spread of false information are exclusive byproducts of social media algorithms and the internet age.
We assume mid-century media, heavily regulated by the FCC and dominated by authoritative voices, was immune to these phenomena.
But this archival record proves otherwise.
Yeah, this is the 1955 equivalent of a viral, fabricated tweet, but instead of being read on a screen, it was delivered into people's homes with the authoritative baritone of a radio announcer.
The medium lent the fabrication an unearned credibility.
The newspaper clippings do not solve the secondary mystery of how the broadcast came to be, unfortunately.
Did a local newscaster severely misinterpret a tangled wire service report?
Or did a station accidentally broadcast a segment of a fictional radio drama, and the sister-in-law tuned in halfway through, mistaking it for the evening news?
Or did the sister-in-law mishear a factual report about something entirely different, and her traumatized brain filled in the gaps with her worst fears?
We don't know the origin of the error, but the fallout is meticulously documented.
The rapid dissemination of false information required significant institutional energy local detectives in 2 states and federal agents to ultimately debunk.
It is a stark reminder that human susceptibility to sensational rumors and the media's capacity to amplify them across vast distances did not begin with the microchip.
And we cannot overlook the devastating emotional toll this media failure took on the family.
To have the wound of a missing loved one ripped violently open by a radio broadcast, to endure days of federal investigation, only for the authorities to finally return and say, essentially, never mind, it was a ghost story.
It is a cruel twist. And tragically, it is exactly where the active archival record provided in these clippings comes to a halt.
The April 15th article concludes with a note of finality. It states that local authorities were left, quote, with no leads at all in the Cox case.
Captain Jonathan is quoted with a sense of weary resignation. Quote, everything has been checked that could be checked in this case.
The local physical avenues, the mail-based social network checks, the out-of-state tips, and the federal radio inquiries had all resulted in dead ends.
The analog investigation had reached the limits of its capability.
But there is one final, incredibly quiet detail tucked into the earlier April 2nd article that I think is the most poignant piece of documentation in the entire file.
Okay.
Remember the insurance policies that detectives found in her room back in November? The ones they used as proof that she hadn't intended to abandon her life?
The financial tether that grounded her to High Point.
The police had been keeping a close check on those specific insurance companies for 6 months. They were hoping against hope that she might remit a premium payment from somewhere out in the world, which would give them a location, a postmark, a thread to pull.
But the April 2nd paper notes, with bureaucratic coldness, quote, these policies have since lapsed due to non-payment.
It is the documentation of an administrative death. Her financial footprint was slowly evaporating, just as she had physically evaporated from Forest Avenue.
It is a profoundly unsettling place for a historical record to stop.
It really is.
When we trace the arc of these clippings, from the incredibly grounded human detail of leaving cornbread for a housemaid in October to the chaotic, fabricated rumor of a body in a New Jersey swamp in April, we are watching a community completely out of its depth.
They were grappling with a terrifying, inexplicable void, and they were trying to measure it using the slow analog tools of their era.
They sifted through closets, they mailed photographs across state lines, they chased radio shadows with federal agents, but they were ultimately left with nothing but lapsed paperwork.
Before we close this archival file, I want you to take a moment and reflect on the mechanics of your own existence today. Think about your digital exhaust.
The location services tracking your phone.
The text messages you fired off this morning.
The digital timestamp of your credit card swiping for coffee.
The Ring doorbell camera that caught you walking out of your house. The intersection cameras tracking your license plate.
If you vanish tonight, investigators would have a mountain of instantaneous data to reconstruct your final 24 hours down to the millisecond.
They would know exactly where you were, who you spoke to, and what you bought.
But in 1954, your existence in the world was defined by a few physical objects left in a room and the highly fallible memories of the people who happened to glance your way as you walked by.
If someone had to reconstruct the last day of your life using only paper receipts, physical mail, and the eyewitness account of a neighbor who couldn't remember if the car on your street was black, maroon, or dark green, what kind of story would they be able to tell?
How fragile would the proof of your life actually be?
It underscores how tenuous the documentary record of a human being was just a few decades ago.
We often look to history for resolution. We want narratives with neat beginnings, clear middles, and satisfying ends.
But when we bypass the history books and dig straight into the raw, unpolished archives, into the daily, ink-stained clippings of a local paper like the High Point Enterprise, we are confronted with a much messier, much more haunting reality.
For every neatly closed chapter in the historical record, for every mystery efficiently solved by a detective, there are thousands of stories exactly like Veronica Cox's.
There are countless lives that simply, quietly step out of the documentary record and into the dark, leaving absolutely nothing behind but a lapsed insurance policy, an unanswered question, and a cold plate of cornbread.